The courtroom was packed, the air heavy with anticipation. A high-profile civil rights case had drawn the attention of the media and spectators from across the city. At the center of it all was Judge Gerald Lawson, a notorious figure in the legal world. Rumors of his deep-seated bias had circulated for years, but no one had ever dared to openly challenge him. Facing the judge was attorney Layla Bennett, a sharp and relentless black lawyer known for exposing injustice. Before taking this case, Layla had been warned, "Be careful with Lawson, he's anything but fair." But she wasn't one to back down, especially when fighting for her client's rights. The moment Judge Lawson entered the courtroom, his presence commanded attention. His cold blue eyes scanned the room, pausing briefly on Layla before narrowing with subtle disdain. He didn't need to say a word, his expression spoke volumes. "All rise for the Honorable Judge Lawson," the bailiff announced. Layla stood, her gaze unwavering. She could feel his contempt radiating through the room, but she remained composed, her mind calculating every possible move. "Let's get this over with," Lawson grumbled as he took his seat. "Miss Bennett, proceed." The way he said her name dripped with condescension, as if her presence was not a professional obligation but an inconvenience. Layla clenched her jaw but maintained a calm exterior. She knew this was going to be a battle of wits, and she was ready to outmaneuver him at every turn. What the judge didn't realize was that today wouldn't go as he expected. Today, Layla Bennett wasn't just here to win, she was here to expose the bias that had tainted this courtroom for years. Stepping forward, her voice was steady and confident. "Your Honor, today we will present undeniable evidence that my client, Mr. Terrence Reed, was subjected to workplace discrimination. We intend to prove that this was not an isolated incident but part of a systemic pattern." Judge Lawson raised an eyebrow, masking his skepticism. "Ms. Bennett, I hope you have more than just emotional appeals. This courtroom deals in facts, not feelings." His thinly veiled insult didn't go unnoticed. A murmur rippled through the audience. Layla's client shifted uncomfortably in his seat. But Layla remained unfazed. She had seen this tactic before: discredit the attorney, undermine their authority, weaken their argument. She wouldn't let it work on her. "Yes, Your Honor," she responded smoothly. "The facts will speak for themselves." The prosecution began its opening statement, but the judge interrupted twice, once to question the relevance of a key piece of evidence, and another time to chastise Layla for what he called an overly lengthy introduction. The audience grew visibly agitated, exchanging glances and whispering among themselves. Lawson's interruptions were blatant and baseless. It was clear he was trying to undermine Layla at every turn. Even the court stenographer hesitated, her fingers hovering over the keyboard as she glanced at the judge. Layla noted every disruption, every dismissive glance, every loaded remark. She knew this wasn't just about the case, it was personal. Lawson wasn't even trying to hide his disdain. When the prosecution called its first witness, Lawson let out a loud sigh, flipping through papers absent-mindedly. "Let's keep this brief. We have other cases to get to." The tension in the room thickened, but Layla only smiled. The judge's blatant bias wasn't going unnoticed, and she intended to let him dig his own grave. The first witness, Mr. Jordan Harris, a fellow employee at Terrence Reed's workplace, took the stand. Jordan, a middle-aged black man, had been hesitant to testify at first, but Layla's determination had convinced him that his voice could make a difference. "Mr. Harris," Layla began, her voice calm yet commanding, "can you describe the work environment and how it affected Mr. Reed?" Jordan adjusted his tie, visibly nervous. It wasn't just bad for Terrence, it was bad for all of us. Management always seemed to treat certain people unfairly. Terrence was one of the best employees we had, but they ignored him for promotions and called him names that were less than professional. "Could you clarify what you mean by certain people?" Layla asked, her tone steady. "They targeted black employees," Jordan admitted, his voice low but firm. "They made comments, assigned us the worst shifts, and said we weren't suited for leadership positions." Before Layla could continue, Judge Lawson cut in sharply. "Ms. Bennett, let's not stray too far into speculation. Keep your questions relevant." The interruption was abrupt and unnecessary, but Layla stood her ground, responding with professional poise. Your Honor, this is directly relevant to my client's workplace discrimination claim. It establishes a pattern of systemic behavior. Lawson leaned back in his chair, a smirk tugging at the corner of his lips. If you say so, proceed, but keep it brief. Layla turned back to Jordan, quickly calculating in her mind. The judge's interruptions were becoming more frequent and increasingly hostile. His smile wasn't just contemptuous, it was a challenge. He wanted her to lose her composure, to falter. But Layla had no intention of giving him that satisfaction. As Jordan continued his testimony, Lawson interrupted twice more, dismissing critical statements as speculation or irrelevant. Layla calmly pushed back, making it clear that his objections were baseless. The courtroom began to stir. Reporters in the back scribbled furiously in their notebooks, and even the jurors exchanged uneasy glances. Everyone could see it now. Judge Lawson wasn't just biased, he was deliberately sabotaging the case. And Layla was documenting every move. When the second witness took the stand, Lawson's interruptions intensified. Layla introduced Olivia Hayes, the former HR director who had resigned after witnessing racial discrimination. Miss Hayes, why did you leave the company? Layla asked. Olivia's voice trembled. I couldn't stay silent. I saw Terrence and other black employees being treated unfairly. When I reported it, I was ignored. Lawson cut in. Ms. Bennett, this witness has a personal vendetta. Layla remained calm. Her testimony is crucial evidence. The judge sighed. Fine, but keep it brief. His bias was obvious. Olivia continued, detailing how Terrence was repeatedly passed over for promotions and subjected to harsher scrutiny than his white colleagues. Lawson kept dismissing her testimony. Layla noted every prejudiced remark, feeling the atmosphere shift. The jury was beginning to doubt the judge's impartiality, but she wasn't ready to confront him just yet. She had a plan. The next witness, Leonard Vaughn, a senior manager, stepped up, looking uneasy. Mr. Vaughn, were you involved in promotion decisions? Layla asked. Yes, Leonard mumbled. Terrence Reed exceeded every metric but was denied promotion 5 times. How do you explain that? Leonard paled. I wasn't directly. Lawson interrupted again. Ms. Bennett, this is an unfounded inquiry. Layla met the judge's gaze. Your Honor, this witness plays a key role. The judge pressed his lips together. Watch your words, Ms. Bennett. You're walking a fine line. The tension in the courtroom was suffocating. Layla knew she was taking a risk, but she couldn't back down. She looked directly at Leonard. Mr. Vaughn, has anyone ever suggested that Mr. Reed was denied promotion because of his race? Leonard's eyes widened. I don't recall. Layla smiled. Really? Because we have an email from you saying exactly that. The courtroom erupted. Mallister slammed his gavel. Order. But the damage was done. Layla could feel the momentum shifting. Mallister glared at her. Ms. Bennett, I will not allow this courtroom to become a spectacle. Layla remained composed. I'm simply presenting the truth. Isn't that what justice demands? The room fell silent. The judge leaned forward, gripping his desk. I decide what is appropriate here. Of course, Your Honor, Layla replied sharply. Mallister turned to Leonard, his tone severe. Mr. Vaughn, do you wish to amend your testimony? Leonard stammered. I didn't mean. Step down. Mallister snapped. Layla immediately stood. Your Honor, I object. Objection overruled. Mallister barked. Proceed now. The courtroom buzzed with whispers. Reporters frantically took notes. The judge's blatant bias had crossed the line. Layla took a deep breath, steadying herself. She had anticipated this moment. Understood, Your Honor, she said sharply. She pulled out a stack of documents and held them up. I would like to submit records of previous trials presided over by you. Mallister narrowed his eyes. How are they relevant to this case? Layla responded firmly. They reveal a pattern of bias, unjust rulings against people of color. The courtroom erupted in gasps. Mallister's face went pale, then flushed red. He banged his gavel repeatedly. Ms. Bennett, you are insulting this court. Layla remained unfazed, placing the documents on the clerk's desk. Records don't lie. They expose a clear racial bias. Reporters scribbled furiously. The jury sat in stunned silence. Mallister shot up from his seat, his voice trembling with anger. "This court is not on trial. I will have you removed." Layla met his glare without hesitation. Where is justice if the court itself is not impartial? She turned toward the audience. This isn't just about Terrence Reed. This is about every person who has been denied justice because of the color of their skin. How much longer will we let this continue? The room buzzed with rising tension. Mallister raised his gavel, his voice shaking. "Enough. One more word, and I will hold you in contempt of court." Layla's gaze remained steady. "You can silence me, but you cannot hide the truth." The courtroom fell into absolute silence. Mallister's face twitched before he slammed his gavel so hard that the sound echoed across the chamber. "Bailiff, clear the courtroom immediately. This trial is over." Chaos erupted, but Layla stood her ground, calm amidst the storm. "Your Honor," Layla said, her voice cutting through the commotion. "You cannot dismiss a trial simply because the truth is inconvenient for you." Mallister slammed his gavel again. "Miss Bennett, you are out of line. This court is adjourned." Layla stepped forward, her eyes unwavering. "It is not I who has overstepped, Your Honor. It is you who have allowed bias to corrupt justice." The audience murmured in agreement, and reporters continued scribbling. Mallister's voice boomed in fury. "Bailiff, remove her from the courtroom." But no one moved. Layla pulled out the evidence, a sworn affidavit and a video exposing the judge's racial prejudice. The room went silent. Mallister's face drained of color as he searched for an escape, but there was none. The gravity of Layla's revelations settled over the courtroom. Mallister's authority had crumbled before a room full of witnesses. His face twisted in rage, humiliation, and fear. His hands gripped the edge of the judge's bench as if it were the only thing keeping him from collapsing under the weight of his own downfall. Layla turned to address the room one final time. "This case is not just about my client, Terrence Reed. It is about holding those who abuse power accountable. Justice cannot exist in a system poisoned by prejudice, and today we have taken a step toward correcting that." The courtroom erupted in applause. The audience stood, clapping and cheering for Layla's courage. Even some jurors joined in, their expressions filled with relief as the truth finally came to light. The bailiffs did nothing to stop the crowd. They knew this moment had surpassed the bounds of an ordinary trial. Mallister banged his gavel in vain, his voice now nothing more than a feeble, powerless echo. "This is my courtroom." A sharp voice cut through the noise. "Not anymore. And not anymore." Every eye in the room turned toward the back, where a state judicial oversight officer stepped forward, flanked by two officials. The middle-aged woman, exuding authority and composure, held a stack of documents in her hand. "Judge Gerald Mallister," she announced, her voice firm and resolute. "Effective immediately, you are under investigation by the Judicial Ethics Committee for allegations of racial bias and misconduct in your rulings. You are removed from this case and suspended from duty pending a full review." Mallister's mouth fell open. The gavel in his hand trembled before slipping from his grasp and clattering onto the bench. "You can't do this. This is outrageous. I've served on this bench for decades. And in those decades, the oversight official responded sharply. You have inflicted immeasurable harm on the very people who trusted you to deliver justice fairly. Your time is over, Judge Mallister." The courtroom erupted into cheers once again. Mallister was escorted away from the bench, his protests drowned out by the triumphant roar of the crowd. Layla stood still, watching the man who had tried to silence her now being silenced himself. Beside her, Terrence Reed leaned in and whispered, "You did it. You really did it." Layla smiled, her composure finally softening just a little. "No," she said quietly, "we did it. This was never just about me." Reporters swarmed to capture every moment, microphones extending toward Layla as she stepped out of the courtroom. She paused to give a brief statement, her words shining like a beacon of hope for those who had suffered injustice. "This is not the end," she said into the cameras. "This is the beginning. The fight for justice is far from over, but today we proved that courage, truth, and perseverance can bring about change. To anyone out there who feels powerless, remember, your voice matters. Footage of the event aired on every major news network that evening. Judge Mallister's name became synonymous with corruption in the judicial system, and his removal was hailed as a victory for civil rights. The state launched a sweeping investigation into all the cases he had presided over, resulting in numerous appeals and overturned convictions. As for Layla, her reputation spread across the country. She became a symbol of resilience and integrity, inspiring countless others to stand up against injustice. But for her, the true victory was the hope in Terrence's eyes as they walked out of the courtroom together. Layla Bennett's story is not just a legal battle fought in the courtroom. It is a symbol of unwavering determination in the face of injustice. It reminds us that while the truth can be hidden, it never disappears, it only waits to be brought to light. Prejudices like those of Judge Lawson do not just corrupt justice, they weaken the very foundation of society. But the good news is that there will always be people like Layla, those who are willing to stand up, fight back, and never back down. Layla Bennett's story comes to an end, not just as a legal battle fought in the courtroom, but as a symbol of unwavering determination in the face of injustice. It reminds us that while the truth can be hidden, it never disappears, it only waits to be brought to light. Prejudices like those of Judge Mallister do not just corrupt justice, they weaken the very foundation of society. But the good news is that there will always be people like Layla, those who are willing to stand up, fight back, and never back down. Looking ahead, we must ask ourselves, in 2025, what will we do to bring about change? Will we continue to allow injustice to exist, or will we be the ones who help dismantle it? By 2030, will racial discrimination still be a painful reality, or will it be nothing more than a lesson from history? The answer does not lie with a single person or system, it lies with all of us. Justice cannot sustain itself, it requires those who dare to speak up, who dare to challenge power, and who refuse to accept injustice as the norm. Each of us, no matter our place in society, can contribute to change. Today, we can start by raising our voices when we witness wrongdoing, by supporting those who are treated unfairly, and by educating ourselves on the discrimination that still exists. Now, imagine a world 5 years from now, one where outdated prejudices no longer have a place, where people are judged by their character and abilities rather than their skin color or background. That world will not come into existence on its own. It will take all of us working together to make it a reality. What about you? What do you think about this story? If you were Layla, how would you have acted? If you had ever witnessed injustice, would you have the courage to speak out? Do you believe that by 2030, society will truly be more just? Share your thoughts in the comments. It is through these discussions, through different perspectives, that we can move closer to a fairer society. Personally, I believe that even the smallest actions matter. Standing up for what is right is not always easy, but it is necessary. Layla Bennett has proven that courage can shake an entire system, and who knows? If we all dare to take a stand, perhaps the world will become a little fairer each day. Disclaimer: this story is entirely fictional and created for the purpose of raising awareness. It highlights the importance of responsibility, justice, and treating others with dignity and respect. We strongly oppose violence, prejudice, and injustice in all forms. Viewer discretion is advised.